Hey, what's up, world? This is Corey Stay Trapping with Trap Talks, where we talk about the intersection of culture and tech. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Hady Mendez, I guess New York's very own, right? And just to tell you a little bit about her, she is the founder and CEO of Boldly Speaking, and actually is the former director of equality at Slack, which was acquired by Salesforce. And she also worked as a customer success manager and global lead at Cloudflare. So, um, did I miss anything?
Oh, I've had a lot of more jobs than that, but we don't have to talk about all of them.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, let's start there. I guess what jobs did I miss?
Let's see. Before I worked at Salesforce and Cloudflare, I actually worked at a school in the South Bronx as a community school director for 3 years. And I was working with the families in the lowest or the poorest congressional district in the United States. So a very high need
Wow.
community. And I did that for 3 years. Before that, I was a volunteer in Bolivia in South America, and I worked with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women um, in a place called Cochabamba, which is like the third largest city in Bolivia. And
Mhm.
Bolivia is the poorest country in Latin America. So there's a theme here. And
Yeah.
then I also worked for BNY Mellon. I was a product manager. I was a relationship manager when I was there. Um, Before that, I worked at JP Morgan Chase. I was a program manager and I was a project manager. Before that, I worked at a small company called Quasha Lipton. It was a benefits consulting company where I was a programmer. And then before that, I worked at a company called Accenture, and it's a consulting company, and I was a consultant. And that's the job that I had when I first graduated from school. So, yeah, lots of different roles, lots of different hats over the years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like about time you started your company. Like you have so much broad experience. Um,
Yeah.
the one thing I noticed when you talked about those other roles that I missed out is that you like to support and work with people who need a hand up, right? Not a handout. Why is that? What was it, what is it about helping, people who are underserved that really pulls your best self?
I don't know. That is it though. You got it. You nailed it. I like helping other people. I like helping making other people's lives easier. Uh I don't know the why exactly, except that I don't know, maybe it's just like my upbringing. Um, I know that my family and I came from very humble beginnings, and maybe that's got something to do with it. I knew how hard it was for us, and I want to make it easier for other people. Um, yeah, and I think it was just the way I was raised. I've always, well, have you ever heard of Enneagram? I don't know. It's like a personality thing.
I never heard.
Well,
Is it like Myers-Briggs?
yeah, so it's not exactly like Myers-Briggs, but I could see us talking about it in the same sentence. So Myers-Briggs, it's definitely like your personality type thing, like extroverted and whatever, thinker, feeler, all those things. So I've taken the Myers-Briggs a lot over the years. And
Yeah.
then this Enneagram is a different kind of test, and it talks about like it's almost like what are your superpowers, but at the same time it's your superpowers when you're in a healthy place. And when you're in an unhealthy place, those same superpowers can be like your Achilles heel.
Yeah.
And so my superpower is advocating for other people. Like it's a number. It's a number scale, and my number is a number 8. And 8s are always advocating for other people. Like that's our thing. It's like we're like everything's like justice and equality, and like that is our shtick, and that's how we move through the world. And we're always advocating not only for ourselves but others. And also you can see how that can also, if I'm not in a healthy place, how that could also, it comes across as like complaining and maybe some other unhealthy behaviors. So I do feel like it's part of who I am. It's just like I get also another part of me. I just took another person. I like taking personality tests. I just took another one. It was more like a leadership thing. And my leadership style, there's like colors, and my color is red. And red, we are really good at like understanding things very quickly. That's like part of our personality, but also part of our personality is that we don't ask enough questions because we think we're like, yeah, 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 I got it. And so anyway, it's just really interesting how you know, like over the years, how much you learn about yourself and how telling those are very valuable tools to have in your back pocket because it helps you to understand how you are and then how you can be in relation to other people. So I like those. But yeah, I'm an ESTJ in the Myers-Briggs test and I'm an 8 in the Enneagram. And then I'm a red in this other thing that I don't know the name of.
Oh wow, wow. Okay, I haven't heard of the anagram. But I did the Myers-Briggs and I'm an INTJ.
Oh, okay.
And
All right, so we have two letters the same.
yeah. So Obama is INTJ and Jay-Z is actually INTJ.
Oh, dope.
Yeah.
I bet you Oprah is like ESTJ like me.
Yeah.
I'm a, I'm a
I
fitting
haven't
Oprah.
looked at it in a while, yeah, but it's I don't I'm really big into astrology too.
Okay.
So it's it's very it's very interesting because I what I've noticed is that with numerology and astrology, your personality doesn't necessarily change, but it seems like Myers-Briggs could potentially change, obviously, as your environment evolves. And I actually used to work for a company called Good& Co, where they built a model around Myers-Briggs, and they showed how your dominant and recessive traits change based on your team dynamic, right? And so it kind of leads me to my next question that you said, right? How you're big at advocating for other people, and obviously you worked in the D&I space. Um, I've actually heard a lot of D&I people express how they were frustrated by they're doing this good work, but then it's almost like leadership, doesn't or hasn't supported them, right? So, how do where do you see the future of D&I going, and do you think that most of the D&I that needs to happen do you think it will come from top leadership of these companies, or do you think it needs new strategies like having more diverse venture capitalists and angel investors? Like, where do you see the D&I space going?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think well, there's already been a lot of change, even in like the last year to 2 years. If you think all the way back to 2020, which was probably not when DEI started, but it was like kind of the height of it or like
Right.
the comeback of it, like that's when things got really hot around the same time that George Floyd was murdered and other, a lot of activities happened that year. Um, I would say that already we've seen a change, which is, a lot of companies kind of backed away from commitments they made. And they're like, what are you talking about? Oh, I didn't say that. Who said that?
Yeah.
But a lot of companies, to their credit, have like they've maintained their like, DEI reporting, let's just call it that, like as an umbrella thing, and they disclose a lot of information. But I will say, like, it seems to me one of the things that's definitely changing is that people don't want to track the progress in the same way that they had in the past. It was feeling a little too much like quotas and people it's not like it made people uncomfortable. There's been a big DEI backlash and a lot of it is like, oh, this is anti-discriminatory behavior. That's what happened to the Fearless Fund where they got sued.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you're trying to give money only to Black women. It's like, because we only get but like 0.00000, and you're gonna try to take that away from us too.
Right.
So yeah, I do feel like there's a shift in terms of like people they're trying to do the work, but they're not going to measure it in the same way necessarily or disclose what they're measuring in the same way because it feels like there's a lot of people that are going to find ways to start, picking on that and being like, why are you doing that? And that feels like you're favoring a certain group or you're showing preference to a certain group. And so I think people are backing away from that. But I do think that there's a lot of companies and leaders that are committed to the work because they know that it does have a positive impact on teams and people and innovation and profitability. So they're going to keep doing it because it makes business sense, good business sense to do it. Jamie Dimon is a good example. He's like, I'm not one of them woke people, but I know that it translates to a better bottom line. So I'm going to keep doing it. I don't care. We could call it, Frank and beans. I don't care what we call it, but like I'm gonna keep doing it because because I could not because it's the right thing. That's not what he said, because it makes business sense. Some
Yeah,
people will do it because it's the right thing. That's kind of the camp I come from. But
yeah,
like it makes business sense. And to the degree that it makes business sense, there's always going to be some people out there, you know, investing in it and continuing to, yeah, practice the skills, not the skills, but practice I guess the good, the goodness that comes out of the D&I work, which is like improving systems, making processes more fair, and at the end of the day, making everything, opportunities more accessible to more people. So I do feel like a lot of people have been convinced that that's necessary, but I do think how it's measured, what we call it, how transparent we are about it, those are some of the things that are going to be changing.
yeah, yeah. And I just thought about this. We talked about this about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I remember Slack when I lived in the Bay was one of the only, if not the few companies where I would meet fellow Black people and they actually
Yep.
would say, "Yeah, I love working there." I'm not trying to shade any other tech company, but I remember distinctly always hearing that, like, "We love Slack, we love Slack."
Yeah, people who
Um,
work at Slack, everybody loves Slack that
yeah,
work there. Yeah, it
yeah.
was that kind of place.
Can you talk about what fostered that? Because, a lot of times when I've spoken to recruiters and stuff, or, people who work in DNI, you have the what's the what's it called when you are hiring people? It's the opposite of retention. It's the first step to recruiting. So I guess recruiting, right? So a lot of companies will say, "Hey, we have a bad pipeline," but then other companies focus more on the retention piece. And I feel like Slack really nailed the retention piece. Can you talk about like what the culture was that fostered that? Because we love to, because I feel like you was very instrumental in that. So,
Actually, so let me disclose to you and your audience, I joined Slack after they were acquired by Salesforce.
mm,
So I was like responsible for the harmonization efforts, like bringing the groups together from an equality perspective. So I actually really, I didn't have much to do with what Slack, the culture was like before they were acquired. And I can only tell you what I heard. So it's like hearsay, but I did hear a lot of really good things. Some of it was like the fact that it was a small enough company that they heard directly from the CEO like all the time about a lot of important issues. And that was like kind of a big deal. And as you can imagine, the Slack company, their culture was very reliant on Slack. So they had the channels and they had a lot of engagement in the channels.
right,
That one of the benefits of Slack for those people who don't use it, but I'm sure a lot of people use Teams or Google Chat, same idea. There's transparency. I remember when my very first time using Google Chat, I'm like, everybody who can see this, everybody can see this. I'm like, I better watch out what I say.
right,
So the transparency is a big one. The fact that they would hear directly from leadership. And it wasn't like a memo. It was like, he would get on and either write a Slack message or like record something and get on, say like, hey, here's what I have to say about this thing that just happened. Um, I know that um, and I wasn't there for this time because I didn't join Slack until 2022. But when George Floyd was murdered a couple years before, their CEO and senior leaders were like front and center talking about the difficult things. I think, things I heard was like everybody cried together. Like it was a very tight knit community of employees because it was a very small company. And they just went through things together and they had a lot of access to leadership. And he was very transparent and outspoken about important things. Like and that's a young company too. So there are a lot of Gen Z millennials there, and they were like, we need to take a stance. Like we can't remain silent. He was like, I agree, we can't. And he would say things too. Whereas a lot of, I mean, I'm not gonna name names, but there's a lot of CEOs out there and other senior leaders that just act like, wow, you talking to me? Like, what do you want me to say about that? I don't have anything to say about it. And that's not how he was. So those were, and there was just like a lot of respect, deep respect. There was a culture that was built around transparency, authenticity, and lots of other really valuable, very important values. And that just was, everybody loved working there. Those are
Yeah.
the things I heard. So I know, like, I joined them after the acquisition, and it was a different company at that time. By the time I got there, it was a different organization. And a lot of the people that were there when it was formed and had been there for years, they weren't there anymore.
Mm.
And,
Did you
and then,
did
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I
I
was
didn't mean to-
not finish your thought. I don't want to. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I was
I
just gonna
can.
say that, and then more people left. Like a lot of people were starting to leave, and then even more people left. So it's
Mm,
it's it's not the same company anymore. That's for sure.
mm, mm. So when you were managing that transition from the ERGs, right? Did you notice like a culture clash, or was it more just like people leaving because they were under the assumption that Salesforce was just going to change the culture?
Yeah, I mean, an 80,000 person company acquiring a 4,000 person company is a big difference. And
Right.
so, but also their cultures were different.
Very different. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like a big company and a tiny company, and then it's like two different cultures. And yeah, I would imagine that anybody who's responsible for harmonizing two companies from an equality perspective is going to run into some tension and some, I don't know, the opposing views. And I was no different. I certainly experienced, like, there was definitely different points of view on the same thing, and different values that drove those points of view. And so yeah,
Yeah.
I got to see it firsthand. And it,
Yeah.
it made, it was like challenging. So we had to kind of work through it.
Mm, mm. So what are some ways that you were able to work through it or to get people who had these different mindsets, right? Who were coming from a large company to a small company. How were you able to get them on the same page?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I did is I hosted like an offsite where everybody came together, and we talked about why we did the work, why we were working in the ERG space, regardless of whatever ERG it was. And I
Right.
think that's where we kind of saw, like, oh, okay, like these are people that actually think just like me. Like we might not have the same story, but at the end of the day, we're doing this work for a lot of the same reasons. I said early on in our conversation today that I wanted to make people's life easier, because I didn't have such a great experience early on, and I didn't want other people to have to go through that. And a lot of people, that's what motivates them and inspires them. It's like, I don't want people to go through what I went through. Think about people in the LGBTQ plus community. Like, they're like, I don't want people to have to struggle so much to come out. I don't want people to feel alone. I don't want people to feel isolated. Like, I just want to, I want to have a community where people can feel safe, and where they can come and kind of be their authentic self. And every, like, if you one by one you talk to any ERG leader, that's what they do. That's the
Right.
whole point of the ERG, is to build community and safe spaces for people that identify, that have that common identity. And so I think that really helped to turn the tide. It was an inflection point for all of us, because we're like, okay, we all want the same thing. We're all working towards the same thing. Let's try to get more in alignment with how we get there.
Yeah, and when you were saying that, you kind of remind me of a podcast that I was listening to. I can't think of the name, but Chris Voss, he wrote "Never Split the Difference." He was a
Okay.
FBI negotiator, and he talked about how effectively one of his rules was leading with empathy, where if you're trying to bargain with someone and negotiate, it's not necessarily about you wearing their shoes or feeling their pain, but showing them like, hey, I understand your points. They may not make sense to me, but reiterating the points of the person you're really trying to build with really helps when you're trying to break down those walls. And it sounds like with those meetings on offsites, you did that, but also I would also add too, people are easy to open up when they're drinking, right? So
Oh, well, yeah, but so so it was like, it's kind of cool, because that company, they actually had like what they called, oh, what was, forgot the name of it, but it was like our private space. And we had like cooking classes. We had like a thing, a little workshop on like watching like how honey was made. It was like team building. And then we had like campfires. We had like really good food. We had like, it was just like a nice vibe. And we got away from the office, which was really good. We were in person, which was really good. And it like humanized everybody. Like everybody was all of a sudden a person. It wasn't like, ah, that person, like those people. It was like, no, like they were sitting right
Yeah.
next to you and they're like really cool. They're just like you and they have a lot of the same wants and desires that you have for what happens next. And I think that was really important to for people to see. So yeah, it worked out. It was good. You know, the DEI work is not easy, no matter
Yeah.
what stage you find yourself in. I know that that was a particularly challenging, um, assignment for me. But I feel like none of these assignments are easy because if you're like the first to kind of, put a DEI strategy and plan together, that's a lot of work. And if you're trying to
Hmm.
like sustain it and get people to invest in it, that's a lot of work. And if you're trying to get people to sponsor it and like, be transparent about it, that's work too. So, it's not an easy job because you're kind of trying to get people to do things that they don't really want to do. So,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
there's a lot of upside to it. And I think that's the work. The real work is to allow people to see to get people to see like there's going to be a lot of benefit if we do this. So let's do it.
Right. Right. So I want to go back to one of the many jobs or careers you had. No, actually, this was the volunteer thing when you went to Bolivia. You were working as a missionary. Um, I think I saw one of your previous interviews or I read something where you had, it was I can't remember which interview, but you had a major epiphany. Can you talk about like that epiphany you had when you were doing that missionary work?
Huh. Epiphany. I'm trying to think. Could you be more specific or
Yeah, because that was where you was doing work with the women, I think you mentioned.
yeah. Well, I'm not sure what epiphany you're talking about, but I will share my experience and I
Yeah,
will share what I think is an epiphany, at least one of the epiphanies that I got out of the experience.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I moved to South America. I had never been to Bolivia and I volunteered to go there for 2 years. And so I moved there and I ended up my first couple of months there, I lived with a host family. And usually that's like part of the transition process. And then you kind of find what they call your ministry, which is like what are the work that you're gonna do there. And in true Hady fashion, true Hady form, I found three ministries because one is not enough for me. I always have to do more, more, more. I don't know what it is about me that always wants to do more, but I volunteered in the prison. And then I also worked with the women that were getting out of prison. And then there was a for-profit company that was working with women in the rural countryside. And I ended up partnering with them too as a business consultant. So I had three gigs or three jobs, so to speak, and I was down there. I think the epiphany you're talking about is what happened with the women in the prison. And I would say that the group that I went to Bolivia with, the I guess the sending organization, whatever they call it. Um, our mission was to have like a ministry of presence, meaning that we were just there to accompany the people. It wasn't like we weren't trying to do anything religious. We weren't trying to convert anybody. We were just there to be with them. And that's a kind of a hard thing to understand, especially when you're still in the United States. You're like, what are we gonna do? We're gonna go down there and accompany them? What the hell? What is that?
yeah,
But turns out jail is a great place to be accompanying someone because they got nowhere to go and they got no friends and they got nothing. And you're like, show up and you're like a Christmas present every time you're there. And so I would go to the prison and I would just be like, hi, how you doing? What are you up to? What's new since the last time I was here? And I was just their friend, pretty much. I became their friend over time. They knew my name. They knew when I was coming. They knew the days that I would be there. They knew how long I would stay and whatever. So we would plan things. And eventually I started a support group there. And then I would bring other missioners there. And what I discovered, and I think this is the epiphany that you're talking about, is that they ended up becoming my friend too. So it was a mutual friendship, but that's not what I expected. I thought I was going to be there for them. I didn't realize they were going to be there for me too. And that was though like aha moment for me that I'm like, whoa, like, like I didn't see that coming. And it kind of just happened. But they were like, you don't look good today. You should get some rest. Why don't you sit down? We're gonna get you something to. I'm like, what? Like, what? Y'all are taking care of me. I'm here to take care of you. I moved all the way here from New York to take care of you, you know. And
Yeah.
they always tell you before you go on mission, like, be careful. Like, you're not there to save anybody. You're not anybody's hero. You're not like, you're nothing. You're just there. You're just another person, but like you're showing up for them, and that's it. That's all you got, you can bring to it. But it turns out that they also showed up for me, is what I discovered during that time. And
Yeah.
that was a lovely surprise.
Yeah. So my fiance is a travel nurse and she's done two missionary trips in Africa. One is South Africa, I think Cape Town. Not Cape
Okay.
Town, but it's actually not Cape Town, but it's where Nelson Mandela is from. It's on the
Okay.
tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it. And then also in Ghana. And so one thing she said, which was like similar to you. So in the US, um, our healthcare system or the hospital system, patients in the US tend to treat it like they're going to a hotel, ring the bell, oh, I need a drink of water, right? They literally are, some of them inadvertently treat nurses like they work at a hotel. And what she said was, she said it felt very refreshing to do the missionary work because she didn't know she needed it more than the actual people she was helping, and
Yeah.
how much more grateful they were than a typical patient in the US, right? So it's
Sure.
like it almost kind of brought it full circle when you were saying what you were saying, right? You know, you left your country, right, to help them, but they were actually, you know, you left to get more help for yourself. So
Yeah, I remember in particular, we did pray. Sometimes we'd pray together, like, but that was like optional. Not, no one was obligated to do that. And I remember, so English is my first language, but Bolivia is a Spanish speaking country. So when I tried to pray in Spanish, my prayers were like lackluster. They were so bad. I was like, just imagine like you use very basic terms because like, anyway, long story short is my prayers were not good because I couldn't express myself in the same way I could in English. And there was this one woman, you know, she was in jail, and she used to do such amazing prayers. And I remember telling her, I'm like, you're giving, your prayers are giving me life. And she's like, well, you know, you give us life by coming here, so that's the least I could do is return the favor. So, you know, we all bringing something to this situation. But it
yeah,
was yeah, it was very life-giving, and it was a very transformational time for me. I learned a lot, that I didn't need money and material things is the biggest thing I learned, that you know, just having relationships, and that, and having my ministries was, I was very happy. I was very,
yeah.
very happy. It was one of the happiest times of my life.
Yeah, and so one thing I always say to myself when I'm like really hungry and I'm about to eat and I forget to pray, I'm like, well, God knows my heart. So even if your prayers are bad, quote unquote, God knows your heart, right? So
Exactly. I was like, oh my God, what's the word? I can't think of it. She was like, I got you. And she would come
yeah,
up, her prayers were like poetry.
right, right. So I want to talk about the your company, Boldly Speaking. What was that moment where you started to speak more boldly?
Yeah, actually, so I think you know that I just became a best-selling author over the last week. And I have a chapter. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I have a chapter in a book called Awareness Put Me On. And in the chapter, I talk about a very pivotal moment in my journey that really, I think, transformed and kind of like what it kind of shook me a little bit, and it woke me up. And I was like, okay, Hady, you're gonna have to do things a little differently. This is what you've been doing is not working, and you're gonna have to, you know, kind of mix it up a little. And so yeah, so I would say it was around that time. It was around the time that George Floyd was murdered. It was that year. I was at a company event for Juneteenth, and we had a keynote speaker who came in and was talking about the experience of women of color at work. And they were sharing like, oh, you know, they only make a fraction of what like their white male counterparts make, and you know, they don't get promoted at the same rates and things, you know, like things that, you know, we know now, but like it was kind of new information then, to be honest. It was new for me anyway. I really had not had like I think that level of like putting it out there. I mean, I certainly felt a certain way, and I'm sure you have felt it too. Corey, where you just like, is that me? Or like, I feel like that was weird. Something just weird just happened. And this kind of validated everything for me. And once I realized, like, wow, this is a very broken system that just was not designed to see me thrive, I'm gonna have to own being successful. If I want to be successful, I'm gonna have to take that on me, yeah, take it on and own it. And so that's what, I have decided to do. And that's what has helped me to really, advocate for myself more, promote myself whenever I have a chance, advocate for other people as well. So not just myself, but like I said in the beginning, my personality and my inclination is also to advocate for equity for everybody. And it's not exactly new, but I would say like I'm more consistent about it. I remember when I was in college, if a professor was like, and we're gonna have a quiz tomorrow on chapters 10 to 15. I'm like, how are we gonna have a quiz on chapters 10 to 15? We haven't even barely read chapter 15 together. Like that doesn't even seem right. Like I would advocate, I'd be like, no. And then everybody was like, yeah, yeah, like, how to go ahead, say it, and then sometimes the professor would back off and be like, you're right, we just got through that chapter. We'll wait till like next week or something. Or I won't include chapter X and Z and whatever. But the point is that I feel like I've always innately have had that propensity to self-advocate, but I wasn't like super consistent about it. And I do feel like in the workplace, I had a mindset where I was like, these are my leaders. I have to trust them. I have to trust my manager. I'm going to work hard. My manager will have my back. I made all these assumptions and I had told myself all these stories that were not true. And then come to find out like none of that was accurate. So I needed to kind of take a step back, shed some of these beliefs and adopt some new mindsets that I thought were, I feel served me better.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned the pay gap, and I think we talked about this, but I remember I read an article and it talked about how, the average person who doesn't renegotiate their first offer they get from a job, right? They're making 10,000 less dollars annually. I would actually, if you were to adjust that to inflation, I would say it's probably, and again, this is a guess. I want y'all to do your research on this. It's probably more to 15 to 20,000, right? With the higher
Yep.
cost of living, right? Um, and I remember when I started renegotiating offers, I noticed how I was just really making more money. And you literally are giving yourself more time when you renegotiate your offers. But a lot of times the problem with that is, again, we tend to, I know speaking personally from a black perspective, we tend to still get the short end of the stick. Like one of the sayings that I kind of grew up hearing that now I actually don't like is you got to work 10 times harder than
Yep.
everybody else,
Yep.
right? And so I see job postings. I'm actually job hunting now, and I read the job post, and it's like we want someone with 10 years of experience, but then they're paying you like a junior.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I guess which kind of leads me to my next thing. You're in the middle of job hunting, right? Um, what are some things that people should do to remain positive during their job search, right? I think
Oh,
that's
wow.
very important. I hear a lot of people try to give advice, right? You should do this, you should do that. I think that's important. But when I looked on LinkedIn, I see a lot of like people just kind of like down and out, right? But so what are some things that you do, to remain positive during your job search? I'm not sure if you're still doing it, but what are some
I
things
am.
that you think people should do to remain positive?
Yeah, one thing I will say is that the reality is that you're not going to be feeling positive all the time. And
Hmm.
one thing you could do for yourself is to just have space to deal with those feelings because sometimes it sucks. And when you get rejected from a company that you thought you were going to get hired by, or you get the notice that you're not even going to get an interview with this company that you were really excited about, it sucks. And sometimes you get 3 or 4 of those in one week. Maybe you get 2 or 3 in one day. And you don't want to hear from anybody. You don't talk to people. You just like want to be bitter. And I think it's okay to have those feelings of sadness or frustration or anger or just feeling sorry for yourself. I just caution you to process those feelings and then try to kind of move on and get back on the horse, so to speak. So don't stay there. That would just be my advice. You are going to experience rejection. You will be experience moments of adversity. Accept that and receive it, and then just kind of let it go through you and say, okay, that wasn't for me. What's next? I got to dust myself off and get back on the horse. So what's next for me? And so I wanted to just say that because it's the truth. If you've been one of those people looking for work in the last 6 months to a year, you surely have had those kind of days or weeks. And I want to say that's okay. And just try not to stay there too long. And then things that I do to feel better or like motivate myself is some very basic things like eating well, exercising, getting good rest, drinking lots of water, avoiding alcohol. There's a lot of things that I do that are just like basic things that keep me well. And then I also I get excited when there's like a new project. So I try to keep things fresh and interesting. And that is
Yeah.
very motivational for me. I guess, I don't know, maybe part of me has ADHD or something. Like I get bored and I'm like, oh, I've been talking about this thing for a long time. I need to talk about something else. So I'm like, let's shake it up. This week I'm talking about something different, and I'm gonna do a video series, or I'm gonna do some content, or I'm gonna just do something different. And I think that for me is very interesting, and that always motivates me to like just do something else that I haven't done already. Um, and then yeah, I like being around peoples, and I have a lot of communities that I'm part of, and that's always really helpful. I feel like when I'm down, there's a lot of people, we won't name names, but there's a lot of people that have been around me this year that have seen me cry. And, I keep it real 100% with people I trust. And sometimes it's not, and it ain't even people I trust. It's just like, who's standing in front of me? You might see me cry. And that's my humanity that I am, displaying. That's a display. And then
Right.
then I just move on and I say, yeah, I'm really sad. I'm just so frustrated, but and then give people an opportunity to give you some words of comfort. So some people might be like, Hady, this happened to me. It was really hard. And then X happened, Y happened. When I had when that space was available in my life, it allows something else to come into it, but you need to have room for something else to come. So maybe that's what's happening right now. So just be patient, keep going, know yourself, remind yourself who you are, lean into your strengths. So like I have a lot of people in my circle that have been really supportive. So I would say surround yourself with people that reflect who you are back to you, because that's so important. And ask for help when you need it. You're more than likely gonna need some help along the way. If you're one of those people that's been looking for work lately, chances are you're gonna need somebody to refer you, somebody to make an intro, somebody to you know maybe just teach you something you don't know, or give you some information that might help you in another conversation. And so ask for help. And I know that that could be hard for sometimes for people in certain communities, because of this
Yeah.
notion of like, we're the first, we're the only, now we got to be everything, we got to be perfect. And it's like, well, how can we be perfect and then be asking for help at the same time? That sounds like contradictory, but we have to allow ourselves the space to be really good and excellent, and also know that we might still need help. Even if we're excellent, we still might need help to achieve the next thing that we want. And we need to know when to like pull the levers and say, okay, I've been doing a really good job, my performance is great, I feel really confident, and now I'm ready to pivot to something else. Who can help me to kind of like take that big step that I want to take next? And so yeah, those are some of the things that I think might be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. So like, I was recently laid off in January, and so every time around my birthday, and we were trying to book our interview, our first one, I had like a time block for March, right? So usually around my birthday, I take off like 2 weeks. And so I remember when I got laid off, I'm like, am I gonna take off 2 weeks? And I said, you know what? I need to, right? And so I think it's also important, a mistake that I made previously with being unemployed is I lost my identity and wrapped it around my job search, right? So then when I get a no, it hurts a lot more than it should. And so now I'm like, while I'm doing my job search, I'm like, I'm being very specific, but I'm also like making sure to, stay really true to myself. And like you said, right, like what are those routines, right? So, working out every day. I have a gratitude journal that I write in every day.
Nice.
I have affirmations that I do that are more spiritual, that aren't necessarily around my job search, because I feel like what's for me is for me and it's going to come.
Yes.
um Doing my podcast, right? Like, and the crazy thing is that I decided to actually bring back the podcast 3 days before I got laid off. And I actually
Wow.
found out the Saturday I was getting laid off before it was announced on Monday. So I was able to prepare, but I also kind of seen it coming because um I look at a lot of economic data. Because one of the things I do is I trade on the side, so I have to always look at economic data. So I foresaw this happening like 6 months in advance, and so I was prepared, eerily enough. So when it happened, it was almost like a big relief. Um, but there were things that I did to protect myself, right? And I remember when we were talking, we talked about was I really big in the fire movement or whatever, right? And I think it's very important for people to diversify your income or have some type of like long-term investment where, if you have to dig into it, you can. And I think a lot of, when you look at the state of the economy today, right, people, are have lost their income, right? Well, what is your backup plan, right? So I think that's also, I want to get your thoughts on that. Like, what are some things you've done, I guess, financially to kind of make yourself more secure, right? To be able to still be, who you are, right? And not
Yeah.
be super stressed over your job search.
Um, well, I was saving money for a house. So I had
Mm,
this little nest egg that I was like about to launch. I had just sent a note to a realtor and said, What's the first step I need to take?" And then I got laid off like 3 days later. So I was like, just kidding. I'll get back to you. And then that's the nest egg that I've been using. Um, and then, I got a severance package. So I put all that money away. Yeah, so this is not the time for, and I agree with you that you got to do self-care. I actually went to Puerto Rico for about a month and a half, and the first thing I did was I went on a retreat and then I stayed with my family there. And that was like super great and relaxing and nice and being felt supported and, just all the things. But for the most part, I have put most of my money away. Um, I have, uh, I have like, equity accounts from other firms that I've worked at. And, I have that available to me if I need it. I have 401k money set aside, that money is locked in. And so hopefully, and I don't have to touch that money, but I have it if I need it. Um, then I moved I had all that little nest egg, but I wasn't keeping it in a high yield savings account. So then I did that. So that's nicer because I'm making a couple $100s every month just from having my money away. Then I took some of my earnings from my business and I opened the brokerage account and I've been buying stock slices. So like now I'm investing in some cool things, a lot of tech companies because I love tech, but not
right.
exclusively. There's different kinds of companies. Um, yeah, so I just have a lot of little things in the works, just and trying, and then the budgeting. So then I've been really good about budgeting. There's more stuff now that I think about it. So then I really cut down my spending as much as I felt that I could. And the next thing that I would have to do at this point is probably move somewhere cheaper. So right now I live in Brooklyn and it's not cheap to live here. So that's probably the next thing that I'll do is move to a lower cost place. But but other than that, I lowered my expenses and I've been really good about that. I'm very good with budgeting and tracking where my money goes. And then I actually took on a part-time job. So last fall, I said, you know what, I'm gonna take a job it was a retail job. And I said, I'm gonna take it during like the holiday time because I knew my business was gonna slow down. And I kept the job. I still have it. So I've been working at Athleta. It's like a part of the Gap family of stores. And I've been working there since November. So that's how I add a little bit to my income. And then I've been writing essays for Business Insider. I get paid for that. And, you know, so little side hustles here and there. So just, you know, making it all add up and taking on different kinds of work too. So I started off doing speaking engagements, and then I'm doing a much bigger variety of offerings, and I kind of adjust as needed. So I'm like, what are you looking for? I'm like, that's okay. I don't do exactly that, but I'm willing to do it. And I'll
Right.
do that too. And then I can make a little extra money that way too. So I have found more ways to make monies, lots of ways to cut back on my costs. And then I just am really good about my debt. You know, I have no debt essentially, you know, pay off all my credit cards on time. And I'm just keeping that nest egg nice, and I'm taking care of it like a little golden egg. So
Yeah. 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 I love that. Like one of my things, um, and people who know me, I've said this before, right? So, when I think about Social Security, I don't think it's going to be here when I'm reached that baby boomer age. And so I have, a lot of monies in crypto, right? And so for me, my crypto is my, I essentially
that's your
treat
insurance
crypto like it's
policy.
stocks. Exactly. And then I treat regular stocks and ETFs as bonds, right? And so that's really been helpful because sometimes, I'm like, wow, like when I go through those moments where I'm like, wow, this is kind of overwhelming. I'm not getting a job as quick. I'm not getting the interviews. I'll just pull out my phone and look at my bank account and look at my stock portfolio. And I'm like, wow, all my portfolios, I'm up 20 to 30%. Crypto, I'm actually up almost 400%. And
Oh,
so then that brings me back down. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm doing fine.
yeah, you're
Right. Well,
fine. Thank God.
yeah, I'm just glad that I put my money there, right? Like I literally have most of my monies is actually in the market. I have like a little bit in cash, and that's kind of all. How I've always been. I'm more risk adverse, and so I like taking more risk. So, but yeah, that's good you're doing that because I think and for people to hear how you're actually balancing yourself out because again that's one thing I noticed when I see certain people. Like I remember someone wrote a post. It's like I maxed out my credit cards and da da da. And I'm like, wow, what was your, Mike Tyson has his famous thing. Everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. But I think it's important to plan as if this will happen. And like I said, I've been unemployed, before. And
Yep.
so whenever I get a job, I just go crazy on saving, put it in the market, And so it's, you save your money today so it can save you tomorrow, right? So
Absolutely. I think, you know, I'm probably the opposite of you in terms of taking risk. I've always been like, my risk tolerance is like zero. Uh, but and you know that has showed up in my, like, where my money is now. It's not, it didn't grow as much as it could have or should have, but you know, kind of too late now for I can't go back in time, so I could only do what I can do at this juncture.
it's not too late.
No, no, but what I mean is like whatever happened up to this point, like it's like I can't change it, so I could only change what I do from this point forward. And yeah, so I'm trying to be a little bit more, take on a little bit more risk because I know, you know, there's a chance that I can get a bigger return if I'm willing to take a little bit of more risk. So I'm trying to do that. But let me tell you something. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't look at all my accounts and all the numbers. And I'm like, this, it better all be positive. I cannot stand to lose another penny. So I'm always
Yeah,
like looking at all my accounts. I'm like, okay, everything's still there. And it's actually went up from last month. Okay, good. Whew. You know, so
yeah,
like that's my
yeah,
goal. It's like a game for me. And I'm like,
yeah.
you know, like even like with my American Express and you know, I have an American Express card and I have an Amazon card. Those are the two cards that I use to build my credit. And I pay them both off every month in entirety 100%. And but I have limits that I have built in for myself for them. And all I do literally just about every day is like make sure I stay to that number. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting really close to my limit. How can I play around with things so that I am like, you know, moving things somewhere else, redirecting so that I stay within the limits that I've set for myself. And you know, there's ways, if you're paying attention, you can like, you know, arrange things so you get a little, like another week or two, extra week or two buffer to pay off your bills. And so that's what I try to do. So I've gotten really good at that.
Yeah. And so one trick that I do is when I look at my portfolios is that I don't like to look at that day, especially because March and April tend to be are the worst 6 months of the stock market. You're going to see a downturn. And so the trick that I do is I don't look at the day or the week. I go to all time. So as long as I had this stock, and then I'm like, oh, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Like,
sometimes you have to, yeah, reframe. It's reframing. You have
right,
to do that.
exactly. Yeah, and I give you an example, like Apple, right? I bought Apple. Not gonna say how much Apple I bought, but I initially bought Apple at 130 around that amount, right? And so yeah, Apple's down. It was up 210, right? And then I'm like, wow, I'm down. And I go to all time. I'm like, oh, I'm still up. It's
Exactly.
like, so
I got Apple too.
yeah, Apple's one of my favorites. I'm moving more now towards ETFs just because with ETFs, I like doing research, but with ETFs, you're basically hiring a team of researchers that know you, and they won't say this publicly, but they have a lot of inside information, right? And so they're running these numbers day and night. They're reallocating their portfolios, and so with
Yeah.
ETFs, you're basically you got a hired army. And so now I've actually switched to more ETFs, but still, have like a small percentage directly in stocks, the ones that I like.
Yeah, same. My 401k is all like mutual funds and like bonds kind of thing. Like it's all very
Mm,
like very secure. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's all like
low
pretty,
volatility, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
exactly. Low
Yeah.
volatility. It's my stock slices with Schwab that I'm like, I'm gonna play. So I'm like, what do I want? Do you have NVIDIA?
I don't have Nvidia directly,
What?
but all of the ETFs that I own have
Oh,
in
NVIDIA in them.
Nvidia
Okay,
in
cool.
them. I kind of missed that. I don't like to say I missed that boat, but the way I had my money allocated, um, I didn't really want to chase it. And
Okay.
then I don't like, I don't like getting into companies that I don't know intimately about, right? Like so for me, I know a lot about Tesla that most people don't because I worked in the renewable energy tech sector. So I'm more comfortable holding Tesla, even though it's down more than Nvidia, because I don't know
I
as
see.
much about semiconductors, right? I don't
Got
really
it.
know the in and outs. Um, and that's like one thing I tailor um what my interests are and my risk appetite towards what I'm more geared around. So like crypto, I'm all in on crypto. And so, my risk tolerance in crypto, like for me, you know, Bitcoin's gonna drop 85% um every 4 years or close to. And so I'm comfortable with that, right? But I'm not really comfortable losing 85% in the video because I don't, really know that. I'd rather own it
But
through
you don't know when it's coming back.
yeah, I rather own it through an ETF because the
Nice.
stocks the stocks that I own I actually watch their prices. I
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
do a
yeah.
lot of
You're,
charting.
you're more hardcore than me. I'm kind of like playing with it. I'm like, ah, whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
What's another $1,000? Ah,
yeah. No, I don't know about that, but
I'm having
um,
fun and I'm up. So
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I've been up since the market turned around. Actually, I mean, I was up in some stocks before then. With crypto, I'm never really down because I've owned it so long.
Nice.
But it's really funny what I'll tell you about crypto. I know when it's up when random people call me and ask me about it. Like I used to have braids back in the day, and so my the lady that braids my hair, she texts me. She's like, "What's this Bitcoin?" I'm like, "Why is she asking me about Bitcoin?" And I go look at the price. I'm like, "Oh, it's going up." And then when it's down, particularly in 2021, I think no 2022, I would get random messages from people like, "Corey, are you okay?" And I'm like. I'm like, I haven't put out anything depressing on like Facebook or anything. And I'm like, let me look at, and I'm like, oh, that's why.
That's
Right.
why.
So yeah. But yeah, I gotta say this too. This is an investment advice. So do your own research. So anybody watching this, we didn't tell you to do anything. We just talking about the way we do our
Yeah, we're
thing.
just
So
having fun.
yeah, yeah. So if you take our words and don't do your research and make a bad investment, don't come suing me. You just be practicing. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, gosh,
I'm
it was
trying to
one.
hide from the sun here. I don't know if you noticed that the sun has been creeping up on me as we've been.
Oh, I am starting to notice it looks like you're lightening up. I didn't realize
Yeah,
the sun was coming
I'm
out.
gonna move. Shouldn't affect the video, but I'm gonna move to a different location.
Cool, cool.
I think the lighting will be better there. Okay.
Yeah,
All right, that's better. Yeah, I was like disappearing.
yeah. Um, oh yeah, this is what I wanted to ask. So, what does it mean to know how to play the game in corporate?
Ugh. Um, so I'll start off by saying that I am probably not one of the people who plays the game very well, if I'm honest. And that, has there's been consequences to that. But I tend to just kind of be pretty authentic and I don't really like playing games, especially games that I don't know the rules to.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
your point, like you want to know what's happening. You know what you want to know what you're getting into if you're going to play a game. And if no one tells you what the rules are, but you're like expected to play this game, it just kind of feels like you're never going to win. And that's how I have always felt about, really subscribing to these games in corporate. So I think when people play games or when they say they're playing the game is like they're doing the things that they think they need to do to get ahead. And that could be, I don't know, working late. But that was back in the day. And I don't think people do that very much anymore. But back in the day, working late or working weekends or something, that was like, oh, wow, like that person is so committed and invested. Maybe aligning yourself to a specific leader, kissing up, that's a lot of what the game is. It's like, oh, you're great. I love you. Like totally, I'm not one of those people. I don't, like I said, I don't do that well. Maybe adopting a certain point of view where maybe you don't even agree with it, but you're just like, yep, I agree with you. And that's very hard for me to do because I'm not like a good poker player. So it's like, if I don't agree, if I don't really believe something, I'm probably not very likely to say that I agree with it. So maybe I'll stay silent, not say anything, but you're not going to get me to say something that's not true. And yeah, I just don't do that. And I definitely would have worked for people that like will lie to a customer's face or lie to, I don't know, anybody. And they just make things up or they'll just kind of play along. And I just don't do that. So but I do think that people that are willing to do that, they can be quite successful by corporate standards. Um, and then I think people like me sometimes, like people will call me a straight shooter and they're like, yep, you're a straight shooter. Like you're pretty honest and like we know what we're going to get with you. For me, that is something I'm proud of. But sometimes it works against me because, I don't get on board, so to speak. And there's some leaders like people, everybody get on board. This is how we're going to do it. And if you're not like playing the game and getting on board and drinking the Kool-Aid, you might be left behind.
yeah, yeah. And when you speak about that, that was one of the things that really pushed me to transition into product from sales. Because what I noticed is that in sales, they don't necessarily, and this is a very general statement here. I'm not saying that all companies are like this, but when you're in sales or go to marketing, it feels as if you're more treated as like the wheels on a car, right? The wheel turns, so you have to go this way, right? And when I got into product, and I had been doing product management for a lot of entrepreneurial things that I had been doing, but one thing that I know is about product that I really love is that discourse and disagreement is actually celebrated. Like you don't want it's one of the worst things to be a product manager when you just kind of go with the flow when you're
I
the core
agree.
of your existence and your job is to do research and do what the research does. So it's like, even at my last job, leadership would say certain things like, well, I'll give you an example. I remember one time um we were in a team meeting and my boss at the time was talking about something. He was like, "Hey, give us feedback or whatever." And I said, "I don't think leadership understands our customer." Right. And so he looks at me, he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, leadership understands strategic enterprise customers very well, and I get it because they're the ones where we get 80% of our revenue from, right? Um, but the corporate small clients, I don't think they understand them well because the big clients want more control. Smaller clients don't want as much control. Then he says, well, what can we do to make it better? I'm like, just listen to one recorded call a week of a corporate client. Or if you listen to two recorded calls, mix it up. Have one to be enterprise strategic, one be corporate, right? Um, and so it's very tricky when you talk about like playing a game or, because it's like you said, right? It could either more times than not, it could hinder your career. But I actually have found that I have gotten a lot more power in my career because I've been able to direct it exactly where I want it to go. And I've had some short term bumps, but I felt like long term, I'm exactly where I want to be because I'm like, I've carved it out. But I've taken, I've done some things and I'm like, and I tell people, I'm like, I'm doing this. I don't advise people to do this because you
Yeah.
can't deal with the repercussions of
But yeah, I
it.
was about to say you have the high
Yeah.
risk tolerance, so you're willing to
Yeah.
take the chance. And
Yeah.
so yeah, you don't know, we don't know what the outcomes are going to be or the consequences, but sometimes you got to like just play devil's advocate or share a different point of view. And like I said, uh, you're lucky, I know what you mean about a product team have creating a space that's much more open to that versus like a sales team. I would agree with you wholeheartedly that would make a lot more sense. But at the end of the day, you also need like a management team that creates the environment where you could be more open. Like I feel like every time I've been authentic, like let's say they're like, I'm like, I know I wish I was a better communicator. Then the next time I have a development meeting, they're like, well, you're a horrible communicator. I'm like, wait a second, I told you that I wasn't a good communicator. Now you're using it against me? What the hell? So like I've been burned so many times. That's what I'm telling you. I'm like, please,
Yeah.
no games. Let's don't ask me things that you don't really want to know the answers to, and don't play the game about how you're trying to help me and then use that information against me. That is, but it's happened. It's happened to me. And
Yeah.
when you see that happen, when you have that experience, you don't trust easily because you know you've been burned before. You're not really trying to get burned again.
Yeah. And that's why later on in my career, when I have these, what you call them, annual reviews or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't go first. I let them go first. Like, you tell me what I need to improve, and then
yeah.
I'll tell you whether no, I don't agree with that because of X,
Exactly,
X, X, X,
exactly.
X,
I agree with you
or
at this point. That's how I am too. Not so much in the like who goes first part, but like in the rejecting false narratives. And it's like, well, no, actually, that's not the case. Can you please give me an example? If you're gonna say something, you're gonna call me X, Y, and Z. Please give me an example or several examples of what you mean. Otherwise, I'm not gonna accept that feedback.
yeah,
And I'm not gonna say that everybody's feedback is false. But like when someone is like generally making some general comments against you and they don't really have good data or examples to support it, that's a no.
right, right. Yeah, we can kind of go on and on there, but yeah, I think I think people can get the point from there. Um, so yeah, one last question that I have, Hadi, what do you want people to walk away from, today? I think I have an idea, but I want to hear it from you. What do you want people to walk away from my interview with?
Well, I think, my inclination would be for people in your audience to to feel like the ability for you to succeed is in your hands. You can very much be the owner of your story and the driver of like where your destination. Like you control a lot of that, a lot more than you think. You have more power than you think, than you know, than you probably exercise. And I challenge and encourage everybody to really step into your power, own your narrative, speak your truth, go after the things you want, and know that you're enough and you deserve good things.
Yeah, I I actually was going to say that you want people to, speak boldly boldly
Yes, of
speak.
course, always. Step into your power and boldly speak the things that you want and ask for help when you need it, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I just thought of another question I want to ask you, and then we can end it there. Um, do you think technology, and you as an extrovert, do you think technology is making us more introverted, or do you think it's making us, more extroverted? We'd love to get your thoughts on it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was gonna tell you before too that I've always been the same four letters in Myers-Briggs, and I started taking that test when I was like 18. So
Mm,
my whole life I've always been an ESTJ. I'm sure that I've moved the needle in how much I am an ESTJ, and I probably in that E, I would venture to say that I've gotten more towards the center. I
yeah.
don't know that it's the technology is the reason why. I think sometimes, you get older, you have different experiences. I live alone, so I'm like used to being by myself and I read a lot and I go to the park and I do things alone and I like it. I don't like mind it. And I know that when I'm around people, I'm always like, like, I'm off the charts with my energy levels. So, um, your question is a really good one. I don't know that I have a great answer to it. I would say like I think as I reflect in my own life, I know I think about the pandemic and my method of staying in touch with everybody, which I feel is like an extroverted activity, was using technology. So like, that was my main method of like Zooming or texting or like social or whatever to stay in touch with people. But to me, I used it to activate and feed the extrovert part of myself. But at the same time, now, I can see people. Like obviously we're in much less of a pandemic mode. And I think a lot of us still rely on social and technology to stay in touch with people when we could be spending more time around people. And so, maybe we got used to it. Maybe it's easier. I know a lot of people are more brave and more bold in technology than they are in real life. Like they got this whole other vibe and personality. I'm like, who the hell is that? Like the person you're meeting right now, this is the person you would meet if you met me in person, but that's not true for everybody. Some people
Yeah.
they got like their social persona and then in real life persona, and it's like two different people. So I do feel like I don't know if it's like I wonder if for introverts it's a way to not have to, you know, get in front of other people. I don't know. I don't want to no shade for the introverts at all. So I don't want to like make this conversation about that. But I do wonder if people got used to or found ways to feed the thing that they are, whether it's introvert, extrovert, or ambivert, and then they just kind of stayed where they were. I know that I have personally had to make a big shift to get back into in-person, in real life activities, and I'm really grateful and happy that I did. Like when I took my retail job in the fall, I was like, praise the Lord, I'm around people all the time, selling clothes, talking to customers, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm like, this is it. This is what I was missing for a while. And even though I survived the pandemic as an introvert because I was by myself all the time, I feel like I needed all this energy and people interaction. So I don't know if I don't know that I've answered your question. I feel like I've kind of danced around it a little bit, but that's how kind of technology has showed up for me. It helped me to stay connected. And then now I'm like, and I still use technology a lot. So even though I'm doing in real person activities, what I have to do get better at is putting down the phone when I'm around people because there's such a that's I think we've developed these habits and sometimes they're not good habits where you're like I'll get on the elevator and it's like I don't really want to talk to like people I don't know, so I'm like looking at my phone and then like I get into a meeting and I'm like I wonder what's happening on LinkedIn and it's like worry about that later. Like we've grown, I think, as a society, as a people, quite dependent on social and looking up on our accounts or whatever it is that we're looking, checking email, checking our texts or whatever. And i wish I could better delineate the time that I spend with people and just be fully more present and leverage the technology when, there's dedicated time for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I mean, you answered it good. It's your perspective. Um, but yeah, y'all, thanks for joining us. I'm Corey State Trapping Trap Talks, where we talk about the intersection of culture and tech. Ms. Hady Mendez, thank you for taking the time with us. And yeah,
Gracias.
y'all come back to see us.
Bye, y'all.